Nobody expected the most unforgettable moment of my life to begin with a single envelope sitting on my apartment doorstep on a rainy Tuesday evening, yet that ordinary piece of paper exposed years of hidden lies and forced my younger brother to choose between the woman he loved and the sister who had sacrificed everything to protect him. I believed I understood what loyalty looked like because my family had survived every hardship together. But I soon learned that some people see kindness as weakness until they meet someone who refuses to be broken. My name is Emma Brooks, and I was 29 years old when my younger brother Noah invited me to attend his engagement celebration at a luxurious vineyard outside Asheville, North Carolina. I worked as a veterinary assistant during the day and stocked shelves at a grocery store several nights each week. So money was always tight, but I never complained because honest work had taught me that dignity came from character rather than the size of a paycheck. Noah and I had depended on each other since we were teenagers because our mother passed away after a long illness, leaving us to navigate life without the person who had always held our family together. We rented tiny apartments, shared old furniture, celebrated birthdays with homemade dinners, and promised that no matter how successful either of us became, we would never forget the difficult years that shaped our hearts and reminded us that family should always come before pride. Everything changed after Noah met Isabella, a confident financial consultant whose family owned several successful businesses throughout the state and enjoyed a lifestyle I had only seen in magazines. During our first meeting, she treated me with warmth and respect, but as the months passed, her compliments became carefully disguised criticisms. Her conversations often revolved around wealth and social status, and I began to notice that her relatives looked at me as though I were an unexpected guest who had wandered into the wrong room. I never shared my concerns with Noah because his happiness meant more to me than my own comfort, and I refused to become the reason for tension in his relationship after everything we had survived together. Instead, I smiled through uncomfortable dinners, ignored quiet remarks about my simple lifestyle, and convinced myself that if I stayed patient and focused on supporting my brother, every misunderstanding would eventually disappear, never imagining that the celebration waiting for us at the vineyard had been carefully arranged to test every promise we had ever made to each other. The morning of the engagement celebration arrived with bright sunshine and cool mountain air, giving me a sense of peace that I had not felt in weeks as I packed my overnight bag and started the 3-hour drive toward the vineyard. During the trip I replayed old memories of Noah and me laughing in our tiny first apartment after our mother's passing, and those memories reminded me that no amount of luxury could ever replace the strength we had built by surviving difficult times together. When I reached the estate, I understood why people described it as one of the most beautiful venues in the region because endless rows of grapevines stretched across the hills while musicians played soft melodies near a sparkling fountain. Guests stepped out of luxury vehicles wearing elegant designer outfits, and although my simple navy blue dress looked modest compared with the expensive clothing surrounding me, I held my head high because I knew I had earned everything I owned through honest work. Noah spotted me before I could even reach the entrance and hurried across the courtyard with the same genuine smile that had always made me feel safe, wrapping me in a warm hug that erased every mile of the long drive. He thanked me for coming, admitted that planning such a large event had been more stressful than he expected, and quietly told me that seeing me there made the entire day feel complete because I had always been the person who celebrated every important milestone beside him. A few minutes later, Isabella joined us, greeting me with flawless manners and a smile that looked perfect from a distance but somehow felt strangely rehearsed when we stood face to face. She complimented my dress, introduced me to several members of her extended family, and politely excused herself to greet other guests. Yet I noticed that more than one relative looked me up and down before continuing conversations, as though I had already failed some invisible test. As the afternoon continued, I wandered through the beautifully decorated gardens while servers carried trays of sparkling drinks and photographers captured every joyful moment, trying to ignore the growing feeling that I did not truly belong among the polished smiles surrounding me. That uneasy feeling became much stronger when I accidentally overheard two guests speaking behind a row of flowering trees, and although they never mentioned my name directly, one of them quietly remarked that every elegant celebration seemed to include at least one person who reminded everyone where they came from, making my heart sink as I realized they were talking about me. I quietly walked away before the conversation could continue because I refused to let a pair of careless strangers ruin my brother's special day, even though every word they had spoken echoed in my mind. I reminded myself that people often judged others without knowing their story, and I promised that I would spend the rest of the afternoon focusing on Noah instead of allowing bitterness to steal a celebration that meant so much to him. The engagement dinner began just before sunset inside a breathtaking glass pavilion overlooking the vineyard, where hundreds of tiny lights reflected against the windows and made the entire room glow like something from a dream. Every table had been decorated with fresh flowers, elegant candles, and personalized place cards, while a live band played soft music that encouraged laughter and conversation throughout the hall. As guests began finding their seats, I searched each beautifully arranged table for my name, expecting to be seated with Noah and the few relatives we had left. Instead, I discovered my place card resting alone at a small table near the service entrance, beside several empty chairs reserved for photographers and event staff, making it painfully obvious that whoever planned the seating did not consider me part of the family celebration. For a few long moments I simply stared at the card, hoping another guest would point out that someone had made an innocent mistake, but nobody came forward to say a word. A few nearby conversations suddenly became quieter, several curious eyes drifted toward me before quickly looking away, and I realized that more than one person had already noticed exactly where I had been placed. My first instinct was to leave without saying goodbye because I could already feel embarrassment rising inside me, and I reached into my purse for my car keys while trying to keep my emotions under control. Just as I turned toward the exit, I heard Noah calling my name from across the pavilion with genuine excitement, completely unaware that the happiest evening of his life was about to become the beginning of a truth neither of us had expected to uncover. Noah reached me with a wide smile, but the happiness on his face disappeared the instant he noticed where I was standing and saw the lonely place card resting on the small table. He looked from the elegant family tables to the service area and then back at me, and I could tell from the expression in his eyes that he immediately understood something was terribly wrong without needing a single explanation. He quietly asked whether anyone had spoken to me or told me why I had been seated there, and I simply shook my head because I refused to accuse anyone without knowing the truth. Instead of accepting the situation, Noah picked up the place card and carefully compared it with the seating chart displayed near the entrance, his calm expression slowly turning into silent determination as he realized my name had been intentionally placed away from everyone else. Guests began noticing that something unusual was happening, and the cheerful atmosphere gradually faded as conversations became whispers across the room while people watched my brother walk toward the event coordinator. He politely asked who had approved the final seating arrangement, and after a moment of hesitation, the coordinator admitted that the guest list and table assignments had been revised only 2 days earlier after receiving detailed instructions from someone representing the bride family. Before the coordinator could explain anything further, Isabella approached with her parents, wearing the same graceful smile that had impressed everyone throughout the afternoon, although I noticed a brief flash of concern in her eyes when she saw the place card in Noah's hand. She insisted there had been a misunderstanding and suggested that the venue staff must have accidentally switched several cards while decorating the tables. But her explanation sounded rehearsed, and even a few nearby guests exchanged doubtful glances. Noah remained calm and respectful, yet I knew him well enough to recognize that he was carefully observing every reaction instead of listening only to the words being spoken. As silence settled over the pavilion and dozens of curious faces turned toward us, he took a slow breath before asking one simple question that immediately changed the mood of the entire evening, because he wanted to know exactly who had benefited from separating the only member of his family from everyone else. The question hung over the room like a storm cloud, and for several uncomfortable seconds nobody seemed willing to answer because every person understood that the truth would either expose an honest mistake or reveal a deliberate act of humiliation. Isabella looked toward her mother before looking back at Noah, and that single glance was enough to convince me that there was far more happening behind the scenes than anyone wanted to admit. Her mother finally stepped forward with a polite smile and explained that she had suggested a few seating adjustments to make room for important business partners and longtime family friends, insisting that no disrespect had ever been intended. Noah listened without interrupting, but he calmly pointed out that dozens of other guests had remained seated with their relatives while I was the only immediate family member placed beside vendors and photographers, making the explanation impossible to ignore. The event coordinator nervously opened a folder containing several printed copies of the seating chart and admitted that she had received two different versions during the final week of planning. One copy clearly showed my name beside Noah at the family table, while the newer version had moved me to the isolated table near the service entrance with handwritten notes requesting that no further changes be made. Without approval from the bride family, a heavy silence settled across the pavilion as guests quietly exchanged confused expressions, and several people who had been smiling only moments earlier now seemed deeply uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Isabella slowly lowered her eyes, while her father asked everyone to continue enjoying the evening and suggested discussing the matter privately after dinner. But Noah gently shook his head because he believed respect should never depend on whether other people were watching. Without raising his voice or creating unnecessary drama, Noah picked up my place card, walked to the family table, and placed it beside his own before pulling out the chair next to him with a warm smile that instantly erased the embarrassment I had been carrying all evening. The room slowly filled with applause from a few guests who admired his quiet loyalty, while I realized that no amount of wealth, influence, or social status could ever compete with the simple courage of someone willing to stand beside the people they love when it matters most. The applause gradually faded, but the silence that followed carried far more weight than the clapping ever could because everyone was waiting to see what Isabella would do next after Noah publicly chose to stand beside me instead of protecting appearances. Tears filled her eyes as she admitted that she had allowed her family opinions to influence her judgment, confessing that she had become so concerned with impressing wealthy relatives that she stopped recognizing the values that had made Noah fall in love with her in the first place. Noah thanked her for finally being honest, but he quietly explained that trust was much harder to rebuild than a damaged reputation because respect could never exist without honesty. He told everyone in the room that success meant nothing if the people closest to you felt unwanted, and he refused to begin a marriage while questions about loyalty and character still remained unanswered. The engagement celebration ended much earlier than anyone expected, and over the following weeks Noah chose to postpone the wedding while he carefully considered whether love alone could overcome such a painful breach of trust. Isabella reached out to me several times with sincere apologies, never asking me to convince my brother to forgive her but simply accepting responsibility for the hurt she had caused and acknowledging that she had judged me without ever trying to know my story. Nearly a year later, Noah invited me to another family gathering, but this time it was held in the backyard of his own home with simple decorations, homemade food, and only the people who had supported him through every season of life. He had decided to move forward with a different future, surrounded by friends who valued kindness over status. And as we laughed around a small fire under the evening sky, I realized that the happiest celebrations are not measured by expensive venues but by the people who make you feel welcome the moment you arrive. Looking back, I no longer remember the embarrassment of that evening as clearly as I remember my brother quietly pulling out the chair beside him and reminding the entire room what real family looks like when it is tested. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you. The engagement celebration ended much earlier than anyone expected, and over the following weeks Noah chose to postpone the wedding while he carefully considered whether love alone could overcome such a painful breach of trust. Isabella reached out to me several times with sincere apologies, never asking me to convince my brother to forgive her but simply accepting responsibility for the hurt she had caused and acknowledging that she had judged me without ever trying to know my story. Nearly a year later, Noah invited me to another family gathering, but this time it was held in the backyard of his own home with simple decorations, homemade food, and only the people who had supported him through every season of life. He had decided to move forward with a different future, surrounded by friends who valued kindness over status. And as we laughed around a small fire under the evening sky, I realized that the happiest celebrations are not measured by expensive venues but by the people who make you feel welcome the moment you arrive. Looking back, I no longer remember the embarrassment of that evening as clearly as I remember my brother quietly pulling out the chair beside him and reminding the entire room what real family looks like when it is tested. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you. The engagement celebration ended much earlier than anyone expected, and over the following weeks Noah chose to postpone the wedding while he carefully considered whether love alone could overcome such a painful breach of trust. Isabella reached out to me several times with sincere apologies, never asking me to convince my brother to forgive her but simply accepting responsibility for the hurt she had caused and acknowledging that she had judged me without ever trying to know my story. Nearly a year later, Noah invited me to another family gathering, but this time it was held in the backyard of his own home with simple decorations, homemade food, and only the people who had supported him through every season of life. He had decided to move forward with a different future, surrounded by friends who valued kindness over status. And as we laughed around a small fire under the evening sky, I realized that the happiest celebrations are not measured by expensive venues but by the people who make you feel welcome the moment you arrive. Looking back, I no longer remember the embarrassment of that evening as clearly, as I remember my brother quietly pulling out the chair beside him and reminding the entire room what real family looks like when it is tested. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.